Hey, Shalford family, I wanted to bring you all a word of encouragement this Monday morning. We're going to try to start doing some more of these videos this week. And so if you followed along with us, maybe you read one of our blogs last week, we talk about reading the Psalms of the day. So you take the day of the month, so today would be the 23rd, and then you read in multiples of 30. So 23, 53, 83, 113, and 143. And you read 5 Psalms a day, and you can do that and read the entire book of Psalms in a month. And the Psalms are a beautiful way to get led to the presence of God from wherever you happen to be in life, whatever emotion, whatever fear, whatever sin. The Psalms show us how to approach God. And so I wanted to share this morning from the first Psalm of the day, Psalm 23. You probably have heard Psalm 23. You may have heard us preach Psalm 23 a couple summers ago when we did Summer in the Psalms. But Psalm 23 is an incredibly comforting psalm, and it has been throughout all of church history. So I'm going to read it, and then I'd like to encourage you a little bit. So Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell forever in the house of the Lord." Psalm 23 is a psalm of comfort. First, David comes and he recognizes that the Lord is his shepherd. Now, David knew a lot about shepherding. He was a shepherd himself, and he knew that a shepherd was sacrificial, that a shepherd cared for his sheep and was compassionate. He knew how frail his sheep were, yet the shepherd did everything possible to take care of his sheep. So we see some imagery here. He says, lie down in green pastures, leads beside still waters. The Lord is our shepherd, and he leads us to safe places where we find nourishment, where we find rest, where we find food for our souls. The Lord is our good shepherd who does this. And it says he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So he restores us. All we need for restoration is not circumstances in our life to change, but it's for God to change what's going on inside of us. And that's how the Lord is a good shepherd to us. You keep going in verse 4, it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I know that you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So the Lord is our shepherd, and when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I mean, this is a dark place that David's describing. It's a valley, it's a dark valley, and it's a valley of death. I mean, death is looming in this verse. But David reassures us that God is present with us even in those deep, dark, death-defying valleys. God never leaves us. Jesus makes this promise in the New Testament in Matthew 28. He says at the very end of the chapter, I will be with you always to the end of the age. God is with you if you know Christ this morning. Psalm 23 reassures us that even in the darkest place, when you feel that God's not with you, he's still there. And it says his rod and his staff comforts him. And so that's shepherding imagery. Again, the rod was a tool of defense to ward off attacking animals. And then the staff was used to control and lead and guide the sheep. And so God defends us and God leads us, because he is our good shepherd. Now look at the image change in verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. So the image goes from God as shepherd to God as friend. And all of a sudden we're sharing a meal with God. But it's not just any meal. It's a meal in the presence of enemies. Now when we're in the presence of enemies, we ought to feel afraid. We ought to be on guard. We ought to be in attack mode or maybe defense mode. But we shouldn't sit down and have a comforting meal, right? Unless the Lord is on your side. Then the Lord provides such peace that even in the presence of your enemies, you can sit down and have a meal. And it's not a meal that you prepared. It's not a meal that you earned, that you provided. It's the Lord's table. And he invites you to come and sit with him and dine with him. And he anoints your head with oil. Your cup overflows because of what he pours out to you. So while you're in the presence of enemies, while you're in a place of fear and of danger, God provides intimate rest with him. In the Old Testament, the imagery of sharing a meal was one of extreme intimacy and loyalty and friendship. And David is talking about the Lord in this way. The last verse says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." When you read mercy, you ought not to just read kind attitude. It doesn't just mean that God's kind to me and he'll be kind to me. That's very true, but that word is much stronger. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. What mercy is saying is God's steadfast love and faithfulness. It's really talking about God's covenant faithfulness. We would do well in trying times to remember God's covenant faithfulness towards us. That he has made a covenant with us to never leave us, never forsake us, always give us his grace, always provide life for us, always be sufficient where we are not. And the psalmist is saying that goodness and mercy, God's covenant grace and mercy will follow us all the days of our life. It will never be over as long as you live. And we know that we can look forward to dwelling in the house of the Lord forever in this life and beyond. We get to live in the presence of God. So I hope this morning you would go to Psalm 23 and you'd be encouraged that the Lord is your shepherd. He's your friend. He's faithful to you. He will never leave you and never forsake you, even in the most trying times. Shalford family, I love you. I'm praying for you and would love to hear from you. Reach out to me, Pastor Al, Pastor Matthew, and stay tuned. We're going to have more content coming your way to keep you encouraged.